I am Malcolm Childs.
And I am James Skiffins. And we are Just Making Conversation.
The show where we discuss the ins and outs of the model making hobby that we both love so much.
From the greasy sprues to the gloss coats and everything in between, we are going to just make conversation.
Remember, there are other podcasts you can listen to.
Plastic Model Mojo,
The Scale Model Podcast,
Plastic Posse,
On the Bench,
Model Geeks.
If you enjoyed the podcast, consider leaving a review or 5 stars, as it promotes this podcast to more people to enjoy.
Also, consider tossing a coin to your podcaster on Patreon. It just helps us make content for you.
In this episode, we will be just making conversation about working outside of your comfort zone. Do you enjoy being outside or inside the zone?
Being comfortable with what you make could mean you stagnate as a modeller. Some modelers use each build to try something new and expand their skills. But is that the way to progress?
Let's explore the snugness and irritation you can feel when flirting with your comfort zone, the pitfalls of trying new tricks and techniques, and the possible rabbit holes that may tempt you on your journey. Are you sitting comfortably, James?
Yes, I'm sitting comfortably. Shall we begin?
We're going to be talking about the comfort zone. Perhaps we should explain what we mean by that. Perhaps you should explain what we mean by that.
I see. That was my cue.
It was, yeah. Don't worry. I'll edit it out. No one will know.
No one will know. Comfort zone. So let's explain what we mean by the term working in your comfort zone. Comfort zones generally would be somebody who has a familiarity with the style of model making they do, be it the genre that they build, or using Humbrol paints, for example, or a hairy stick, or an airbrush, or blah, 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 blah. In a nutshell, the short story is that every build that you make is the same techniques that you use, the same type of model. So I always do armour. It's always in a muddy field, and it's always undamaged. So that would be a comfort zone. And the question we sort of asking ourselves, as well as you that's listening, is that the right way to be, to stick in a zone? Or is there a benefit from going outside of the zone? Or the other question, of course, is does that make your mojo suffer, of which we've covered in previous episodes? The question to you, Malcolm, is do you like to be in your comfort zone, or are you someone that likes to be outside the zone?
Being a 44-year-old mildly obese man, I like to be comfortable. And I have done for many, many years, enjoy being comfortable. And I guess in the same in the hobby, there are things that I enjoy building because I know how to build them. I know how to fill wing roots. I know how to make undercarriage straight. My point was, if you're building something you know how to build it's enjoyable. If you're having to then kind of struggle and work out different ways and different things to do, it can not, it's not as fun, I guess. It's not as relaxing, and it's kind of irksome to have to do new things with the hobby. So, for instance, I've never made a tank that has snow on it. In fact, I've never made anything that has snow on it. And so I wouldn't have a clue how to start that, or even what products to use, or whether I should prime it in white or not. I don't know. Makes sense to me if you would. But anyway, I think that doing that would be right out of my comfort zone because I don't know how to do it. And I guess maybe I should try it out.
I'm a great advocate of both being in your comfort zone and being outside of your comfort zone.
How do you be both at the same time? Is that like when you're in a duvet and you've got one leg out?
Generally, it's when you're married and the wife steals your duvet. You don't have a lot of choice about it sometimes. That's a different podcast. For me personally, this is how I model. Being in my comfort zone is what I do when my mojo is lacking a little. But my main kick, my main joy of the hobby isn't that I want to be climbing the walls with stress. Oh, I can't do this, can't do that. But I tried different things, be it a technique, be it a different type of scene for a diorama or a figure. I'm not great with figures. I really love the way they look, and I want to be able to do that. Those are the sort of things, for me, I model a bit in my comfort zone, but then I like to try and whisk myself out of that comfort zone and shake myself up a little bit and do something different. A lot of the builds I make would be a Second World War era, Allied, generally American. And I tend to find when I do a build, I want to try and learn a different technique, a different texture, a different finish. That is the way I build. Yes, there are builds I do within my comfort zone, and they're generally quick builds.
Well, I think that's interesting, though, that you've married the two up with Mojo, because I can imagine the reason that Mojo goes because it's just not fun anymore to build a model. And because they're out of that comfort zone, I can definitely see that building something you're very familiar with that is relatively simple, put you back in that comfort zone to say it's okay. Hey, it's all right. Everything will be fine. Just finish that model and then we can get back to stretching that hobby out a bit, Yeah, I find that quite interesting, the marrying of the two.
I know very well that the reason I like dioramas is because you often start with a very simple idea in some respects, whether it be, for example, a figure, and you want to make a little 10 centimetre by 10 centimetre diorama, but two figures in the middle of a piece of foam or hardboard just doesn't look right. It needs more. And in a way, that's a little bit where the non-comfort zone comes in. I have an idea, but I don't draw it out. It's part of my makeup, my history of who I am, is that's how I functioned an awful lot with the jobs that I've had in the past, and don't really know what's walking through the door until it walks through the door, and then you have to deal with it there and then. And maybe that's something I've picked up within my hobby. That's what I mean personally for my way I build.
Yeah.
Sitting there and thinking about all these crazy ideas and trying to put those ideas into a model is quite wearing, tiring. So every now and again to pick a kit up and build a 1/72 Spitfire, or something along those lines, is like a palette cleanser, resetting your mind so you can go off on a different angle.
I wouldn't say it was more of a palette cleanser. I would say it was like a comfort blanket wrapped around your shoulders. And I can imagine being out the comfort zone is kind of going out into the wilderness. You've seen that film Beetlejuice? They're in the house and they open the door and there's these sandworms outside. And they close the door because they don't want to go outside there. You want to stay indoors. And that's what I can imagine the comfort zone being, is being indoors where it's nice and warm and you can go about your ghostly duties. And that's how I see it. It's like a warmth, going back to something that you're good at. So we were talking about kits and figures and things. If I said to you, right, we're going to have to test ourselves and we're going to have to finish something with enamels just because we could and test it out, that, for me, that would throw me completely because I wouldn't have a clue. Would that kind of be out of your comfort zone if you only had a certain type of paint?
When we've spoken about tools not that long ago where paints came up, and I remember we said if your local hobby store has a particular brand and it's easy to get and you don't want to buy it through an internet service, that's what you buy because that's what's near you, that's what's easy to get. And you learn how to use that paint because every paint has a quirk or a slightly different way, the way you use it.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, I use model colour all the time. If I'm looking at the selection I've got in front of me and there is a colour that I need that isn't model colour, then it'll be Umbro acrylics or Revell because they're the paints I've got in front of me.
Yeah, sure. So if I said, all right, we're going to make them with enamels, here's a box of enamels, be lucky. How would you feel about that? Would you struggle or would you kind of embrace the suck, as they say?
Yeah, I'm up for the challenge. Is the nuts of the thing. And it's funny.
And it's going to be in a museum too. It has to be perfect.
Okay, yes, so that's no pressure at all. No, it's funny you talk about enamels. When I first started making models, that's all I had was enamels. So I have a selection of enamels underneath the desk in the box of forgetfulness, but I haven't touched them for many, many years.
Right. So enamels is not really out of your comfort zone then?
It would be. I'll explain why that is. I've seen a model maker, an artist, for want of a better phrase, who only uses enamel paints. But he can get the same effects that I can get with acrylics.
Yeah.
And I have no idea whatsoever how he does that. None.
You talked about that guy before. What's his name?
Yeah, this is Robert Blocker. Just absolutely phenomenal. I really can't get my head around it. So at some point, I am going to tackle that demon and try two faces that are exactly the same. So 1/16 figures. I'm going to do one with acrylics.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do the other one with enamels.
Right.
So I've got both there to look at, which is just crazy. I don't know why I decided I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But it was more of a case of I set myself these challenges
Right. Okay.
to see whether I can overcome them to a point where I feel happy with.
Is that to see what is possible with enamels that you can't do with acrylic? So you have both of those skills under your, say, armpits, under your wing, or is it just challenge?
I think it's just a challenge for me.
Right.
With a lot of the model making I do, it is all about the challenge. I wouldn't say I'm unique. I should imagine there's quite a lot of modelers that wouldn't be like that, because we'll come at the hobby from different angles.
Yeah.
But one of the things I like about the hobby and what it does to me is it gives me the ability to set myself challenges.
Mm-hmm.
If I achieve them, I achieve them. If I don't, then obviously I kick a box around the yard for a good couple of hours and sulk. I try it. If it doesn't work, I'll try it again. If it doesn't work and I just can't do it, I'll leave it and come back to it another time.
Yeah. It's because you ran out of boxes in the yard.
Yeah. Once you kick the bejesus out of a cardboard box, there's only so much kicking you can do.
I think that perfectly rounds up that little conversation. I can hear the music starting.
I've rattled on about me. What about you and your zonal preferences?
You were saying about paints and whether if your local model shop has a type of paint, then that's the type of paint that you end up using. I copy my peers, basically. If somebody has been using a particular type of paint, I'll be curious and I want to see how that works. Or if I'm watching a YouTube video and the chap or the lady has got some really good results with a certain type of paint, I think I would want to try that too. And that's kind of how I got around to having a set of army painter washes, because I watched something and I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. And I'm not used to using them, but I found them awesome for figure painting. For me, going out of the comfort zone is just like trying something completely new that I didn't know was going to work. And I don't tend to do that. I don't sort of make up things in my head. Like, if I squeeze a bit of this in there and I put a bit of that in there, see what happens. I'm always kind of quite rigid in how I build things and how I make things. So I very rarely get out of the comfort zone. And to be honest, that's okay for me. Where I am as a modeler, I am quite happy. I've no kind of real intention to improve because I quite like the stuff I do, and my friends quite like the stuff I do, and so does my family. So I don't really want to get any better. I don't want to lose the fun of doing the hobby. And like you say about enamels, I don't have that drive to try enamels. I would quite blissfully go through life not having tried enamels. You know, I quite like being comfortable. Yeah. I quite like that blanket.
But it's strange, isn't it, given the fact that you recently did a scratch build, which I wouldn't have said that was in your comfort zone, but also the nature of a scratch build is way out there, because you're finding ways to overcome parts of your scratch build which aren't the norm.
Well, you're talking about the old Western saloon that I've done.
Yes.
I saw a buddy of mine who had used a technique to get the scratches in the wood, what's it called, the grain.
Yeah.
And all he'd done is just got some plastic, scraped a saw on it, and then cut that into very fine strips. And I thought, I could do that. Even I could do that. So I did, and it worked, and it looked great. I didn't think that was going out of my comfort zone because a reasonably easy technique to do, and so I copied them. I didn't use anything else that I had never seen before. Any other techniques? It's all dry brush, it's all washes.
I find that interesting the way you described that, because that's not something you'd done before, was it?
No, I've never scratch built something before, but I really enjoyed watching this other chap do it, so I wanted to do it too. But I wouldn't say that was getting out of my comfort zone. If someone said to me, here's some plasticard, make a spaceship, I was like, I have no idea. I'd try and think back to if I'd seen someone do it before, and it would probably just be like, yeah, I've made that flying piece of plastic that's in Superman 1.
There's different elements of zones, isn't there? I was asking the question really was because comfort zones are very much an individual perception, And there are certain elements of things that I would term out of the comfort zone that you clearly don't see to be out of the comfort zone. You see it to be on the peripherals, maybe, of your comfort zone. You've seen a technique. You've never done it, but you've seen it and you're interested by it. So that's within the comfort zone itself, in the bubble, shall we say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was stretching myself to do it. If you said, now you got to do that outside in a blizzard with enamels, then I'd be,
I watched you do that build, and for me, that would be outside of comfort zone.
Right, okay.
So, it just highlights the individuality of the zones, doesn't it?
Well, also, I suppose it was quite easy to experiment with it because it was so cheap, It's a sheet of plastic, 60p, I think, or something?
Yeah.
That's pence for the American and Canadians and Australians listening. So if it messed up, it didn't matter. If I'd bought a model kit that cost a significant amount of cash, doing any experiments or doing anything different or weird or wacky would be worrying to me in case I messed it all up. But if you're doing something small and insignificant like this little thing, it feels a little bit different. But yeah, I certainly feel comfortable if somebody else has done it before and they show me how to do it, and then I copy it and it works. If someone asks me, can you work out a technique to reproduce the seaweed that you find on the bottom of a boat? That's where I would struggle. Ask someone else.
I think that's the point, isn't it? Is when you start talking about different types of expression for your model, whether it be scratch building or even, like you said a moment ago, of your tank in a winter scene. You may go off and explore that possibility and the way people may have done it before announcing to the world that's what you're going to do, sort of thing.
Oh, no, I would certainly have researched it.
Yes.
And I would then have all the products that were necessary, and I would then be comfortable to do it, I think. Probably. Possibly.
That's the interesting part about it, is because by going off and exploring, I'm analysing you a little bit here, I'm sorry, Malcolm, but by going off and exploring and arming yourself with...
Well, I am laying down on a chaise longue.
In your shorts.
It's a leather one.
That's the wingbacks. I lost complete train of thought now.
You're going to psychologically analyse me.
Analysing you by going off and discovering the information that you just suggested. You would have all the products you'd need. You go and look at the way someone's done it. Your peers have done what you aspire to do. Suddenly you've brought that within your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before you decided to do the Western thing you just did, because you'd researched that and because you had seen a technique that intrigued you, that was all brought within your comfort zone because you got that information.
Yeah. Do you think it's because I've got a confidence to be able to reproduce something someone's done?
I think confidence has got a lot to play on it. If I'm honest, that's probably a really good way of explaining comfort zone. Your cozy quilt comfort zone is that you've got the knowledge, you've got the understanding or the abilities to do a particular thing. And if you haven't got those abilities, skills or knowledge, then that's outside of your comfort zone. By going out of your comfort zone, do you increase your skills, your techniques, the abilities that you have as a modeler?
Yeah, I suppose you would have to, wouldn't you? If I said to you, right, you got to make a paper model.
Oh,
sorry, it's a P word. Sorry. You have to then go, right, how does this work? This glue is not working. It's making it turn into papier-mâché. Or this folding technique is not working. I've just cut my finger off. And you kind of have to discover it as you go. That scares me.
Yes.
Talking about that, I don't know if this is a massive tangent or if we want to keep this as a section on its own, but have you ever watched that show, The Model Railway Challenge?
Yes.
It's on Channel 5 in the UK. And they have teams and they challenge them to make layouts with a theme. And then they get judged and everything. And they have to make these things within 3 days. And they're given all the tools and resources and everything else they might need. One of them was the frozen Arctic or frozen or something, ice. I think that was the theme. They had a cotton wool on the mountains and they had like little bits of paper for snow and all that sort of thing. All of them are awesome, fantastic. But for me, that I wouldn't be able to do it. I would be a wreck. I'd be useless. I wouldn't have a clue. I would be on YouTube the entire time. So hang on, guys. Use cotton wool for clouds. But these guys were so experienced that they had built everything already in certain ways, using all the different techniques. So nothing was of concern for them. They were already putting those cotton wool balls up on the wall and painting it blue, and it looks like clouds. That was their inbuilt knowledge. And so, yeah, I guess you're right. If you are willing to push yourself and do little extra things and learn little extra bits, then you would become this railway challenge guru that I'm talking about.
It's like most things. I mean, I can think of numerous amounts of times when I've had a vision in my head of how I want a model or diorama to be, but I'm not quite sure how to achieve it. So I'll do the same. I'll go and sit on YouTube and look at different ways in which other people have done it. Or there might be something that I've come across in my backlog history, which I've stored away. If I'm honest, 9 times out of 10, my memory is pretty shocking. I can't even remember who I'm talking to half the time, but I'll think of something, I'll research it, come to do it, and I'll end up doing something completely different because I can't remember what it was I researched.
I'm with you.
And I don't write things down because I'm terrible like that, as you know. When I keep saying to you, Malcolm, what about this? Yeah. You told me already?
We've recorded that podcast last week. Do you remember?
I mean, I'm thinking of one particular instance where I tried to simulate an explosion. Right. And the great thing about YouTube is that if you look, don't do it now because you'll listen to us, obviously. But at some point,
well, no, they can do it now. They can pause us.
No. Stay with us. It's worth staying. Don't go wandering off. Stay with us. Okay. They're comfortable in their seats, man.
I think they can choose themselves, to be honest.
Of course, yes.
Bye.
Yeah, so if you go on YouTube and you put in there simulate explosion, not only will you be flagged up for many other different reasons, but you come across lots of different ways in which you can achieve that goal. Some will be effective, some not quite so effective, but down to your decision as to which one you think that is. But the materials used are not always the same, so there are lots of different items you can use for smoke. Cotton wool, toilet tissue I've seen done, which, that's not what I would call very effective. But for me personally, the tool of choice for smoke would be toy stuffing. And it's not because I like ripping heads off teddy bears or anything like that, honest. It's to do with the fineness of
fibres.
The fibres, thank you. But then, of course, it's not just the white fluffiness. Smoke and clouds are made up of many colours, not just white. So now you've got to paint it. So it's finding a stuffing, stroke cotton wool, toilet tissue, whatever, which will take the paint of choice, whatever that would be. There's lots of little steps, little hurdles in which you have to go through. And then finally, I got to this point, especially with this explosion, that I got myself some toy stuffing. I, using an airbrush, sprayed a little bit of black and a bit of grey and a bit of this and a bit of that, stuck a light bulb in it and went, oh, yeah, that looks brilliant. And then took it to a show and went, that looks really naff. Oh. The one thing I didn't take into account was lighting.
I see. So if you turn the lights off.
The lighting, i.e. the ambient lighting that's in my hobby room, they're daylight bulbs. So my theory being, well, it's daylight, that would be really good. It's good light in here, but if I'm looking at it and I think it's adequate, then it'll work. You put it into a different environment, so not a 6-foot by 10-foot room. You put it into a great big sports hall where you've got 3 basketball areas. So the effect in which you created is very different.
Yeah. Talking about the other day about model shows, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Where you put your model and all that sort of stuff. We've gone off to on a slight tangent.
Slightly.
But it's because I'm doing a short story,
yes.
Malcolm.
This is the 11th episode of the short story.
For me personally, that's part of the joy of the journey, is trying to overcome those things. And obviously, I'm gonna have to eat my words at some point, but I'm gonna say it anyway, because I've had a few models in competitions and I've experienced those. It looked good on my desk. Why doesn't it look any good there? Moments. Maybe that's something in which I'm learning slowly and overcoming.
I find if I turn all the lights off, my models look fantastic.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The imagination, it makes them fantastically well made.
Well, I always try and go with the theory that once I've finished the model and I'm looking at in the lighting of the room, that I don't turn the light off because that would be a health and safety issue, really. But what I tend to do is I tend to stand on one foot and trap my toes in something that makes lots of pain, so my eyes shut and I can't see anything. And then the model looks great in every level. It's way beyond gold standard.
It's funny. Someone was saying the other day to me that since COVID has started and all the social distancing has been going on, their models look fantastic from 2 meters away.
Yeah.
I think you should set up a modeling zone in the competition area and then paint your model in that zone with the lighting that's going to be used. And that's possibly the best way of doing it, because then you know exactly how it looks.
Could you imagine having a hobby room where you could control the lighting, so you could go into stadium lighting or cloakroom lighting?
Oh, having to put up a basketball net because you want to get the ambience.
Why would you need a basketball net?
Because that's what they have in the sports halls.
I gotcha.
You want to get it right.
Oh, okay. Well, you just want to make sure that shadow from the hoop falls just correctly.
And you work out the exact time and day and time of year that it needs to be just to shine through the light of the windows. I think we've gone tangent. I think.
Yes, I think that was a rabbit hole.
What's the podcast called?
Hoops and stuff.
Basketball hoops. Do you put them in your model zone?
So with the comfort zones and your inside or outside the comfort zones, what rabbit holes do you think you might be tempted or pulled towards that may tempt you in your journey?
I'll say sci-fi things. Oh, and tractors.
So what
are you asking? Like what sort of things I like? Or...
There was me in the last episode saying squirrels, and you're going, look, oh, there's a tractor, tractors, look.
I love tractors. I go on the internet and search for muddy, old, rusty tractors, and there's some fantastic pictures. It doesn't have to be, if you're trying to muddy something up. If you're trying to muddy something up and damage it and make it rusty, look, it doesn't have to be a tank. There are other vehicles available that you can dirty up. There's nothing like a big dirty tractor.
I'm not quite sure where to go with that, but rabbit holes for me.
Oh, yeah. Rabbit holes for you, James. Sorry.
So the rabbit holes with me within the comfort zone, I find generally come about because I've not researched enough. This is something I do a lot because I don't like doing research. A possible rabbit hole would be that you try to simulate something within a model or diorama. So I'll give you an example. I did a diorama not that long ago where I had 3 levels of a building. And the first level was fairly basic, but the second level, you need a bit more detail because you would see things that you wouldn't allow.
Oh, right. Are you talking about that model again that's in your cupboard?
Well, it isn't anymore, but yes. It's in the big box of doom.
This is the bath one with the hinges and taps and things.
Yeah, so because I didn't plan it out, I've got different elements of detail that have changed and evolved throughout the build, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong. Because I didn't do the research, because I didn't do the planning, it's very noticeable. So they're the sort of rabbit holes. When you start adding detail and simulating different details, before you know it, you can be sucked down the pit hole that is taps and plugs on a bath. And
okay.
You know what I mean?
I'm with you. Yes. So tractors is not a rabbit hole, is it? I understand now. For me, then, my rabbit hole is just enjoying applying paint. So if I appreciate something, appreciate an aircraft, okay? Looks like a chessboard, looks like tartan, and then I'm going to put the base color over the top. That process of putting that paint down in light layers is so satisfying. It's really difficult for me to stop and know when to stop so that the appreciate comes through that base color. And I've made 30, 40 models like that, and they're either way underpainted because I was worried about putting too much paint on, or they're way overpainted and you can't see any base color at all. So I think that's possibly a rabbit hole, as I just enjoy application of paint.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing? Maybe it's a thing.
Yes, it is a thing.
Same with figures as well. Like, if I'm really enjoying painting a face on a tiny figure, I'll get to a point where I go, oh, that looks really good. Well done, me. Pat, pat, pat on the back. Let's carry on. And then I just keep on painting and just ruin it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe just enjoyment of the process of the hobby is a rabbit hole.
You're always learning every time you apply even the basic of coats with your airbrush. You're learning something about that process. Whether you're registering it as a lesson or not, you're honing the skill. You're effectively learning the skill of applying the paint. And it's the same with everything else you do within the hobby. There's a good way of doing it and a bad way of doing it. And sometimes you go through a whole kit and you've been very good taking the bits off the sprue. And then there's that one occasion where you clip and you like, can't believe I did that. What did I do that for? It's where you've not concentrated. With the learning of new tricks and techniques and stuff, that can become a rabbit hole. You can overthink it, overproduce it.
Over-enjoy it.
Yeah, you're right. You can over-enjoy a process, definitely. Especially when there's lots of other processes to go through within the build.
Yeah, maybe. Being out your comfort zone, would you say to not stretch yourself to kind of be comfortable? Would you be worried about failure, doing it wrong?
I worry about failure all the time.
Right.
But even when I'm in my comfort zone, I still worry about failure. That's the one thing in which I find probably the hardest for me, for my mojo, is like, my mind is a wonderful thing.
Who told you that?
I really couldn't take you on that journey because I know you just wouldn't come back. It's just a magical place, my mind. I go off on tangents really, really easily. The reason I sort of psychoanalyzed you earlier is because I know that because of my dyslexia, when I was diagnosed and all that rest and the other, the one thing that came from that as a child is you can't say no, you can't do that. That's not in my vocabulary. You can't do that. I fall for that quite a lot in my own self. I'll look at something and go, oh, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. Of course you can. Give it a go. Stop being so silly. Get on with it.
Yeah.
And then I go down that route and suddenly go, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this properly. I don't think it's going to work properly. It's going to look really bad. Blah, 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 blah. You know this for a fact. I will always be degrading about myself and my work, always, because that is my personality.
Mm-hmm.
In the back of my mind, it could also be down to the fact that someone said, oh, you can't do that.
I remember you saying before that you sometimes would preempt what someone might say to you and say it before they do, so that perhaps you get ownership of that term before somebody else says it.
It's taking ownership of the negativity before someone gives it to you. That is exactly.
When we're recording together and you mess up a line, which happens a lot, you call yourself all sorts of names. Like, just chill out. He's my friend. Don't be nasty to him.
Yes. Yeah, that's my other side. He's quite an arse.
Mm-hmm. I don't like him. He's a fuck. I'll bleep that.
It's really easy to find a connection, funny enough, with modelers in their comfort zone modeler or outside the comfort zone modeler, and it's all down to personality. It's all wrapped up in the same thing. And I think that's part of why I enjoy the type of things that I do as a modeler, because I tend to set myself a challenge, and I know by the time I get halfway through that build that my mind's gone off on a completely different track, and I now want to incorporate that. It's a little bit like the B-17. It's B-17? Lancaster. I'm waiting on a kit from to be delivered from Hong Kong Models for the new Lancaster 148th. And I have done a little bit of research, which is quite unlike me in some ways. But it's because I now want to go off on a tangent with that build. And it's a complete tangent. I want to try and make a particular scene with this model, which will entail a lot of scratch building, a lot of reference material as well. But that's because that's how my mind works. I've gone off on a completely. If I'm honest with you, one of my biggest problems is that everybody builds a Spitfire, Battle of Britain Spitfire, black and white wings, blah 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 blah.
Everyone likes that esoteric.
Oh yes, it's very nice, and I've done it. Don't get me wrong, I've built them. It's very nice. They're a very nice build, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I've also seen it done in red and pink because it's unusual. I want to do that one because it's different to the majority of what's going on. Pretty much all the builds I do generally will try and find something different. I want to do something. I want to do that kit, but I want to do it differently.
That's you being in your comfort zone, having that choice then.
Yeah, I think it's partly the choice, the fact that I know it's going to be different because it's not going to be Tamia's olive drab. It'll be James's model colour olive drab.
It's incredibly drab.
Oh, yes. Doesn't look very much like olive either, but never mind. I think we've discovered that the comfort zone has many different elements to it and isn't necessarily just that duvet that you've wrapped around yourself. It can include the room you're in, the house you're in, the street you're in.
And how you feel comfortable in yourself as well, in your own mind.
Definitely, yes. Definitely.
Wow.
So yeah, that's quite deep. I don't think we intended to go that deep when we thought this subject up, but being outside your comfort zone, it's nothing to be afraid of. It should be something that's embraced. While I'm sure you're sitting there shivering, thinking to yourself, the man's a nutter.
You don't know what he's saying. Who gave this guy a microphone?
Yeah, you're probably right. You probably don't realise how much you go outside your comfort zone already. Step that little bit further, try something new. Don't be worried about what it will look like, because there is always the possibility that it will be fantastic.
Also, once you've done it, then that becomes your comfort zone. So eventually everything is in your comfort zone and you can be at one with everything.
A Zen master with the plastic.
That's right. Or my favourite pizza.
With the fireplace dying down and the leather in the windbags stinging your legs, it's time to grab your cozy anorak and head off to the zone of choice.
Embrace the inevitable possibilities of failure or triumph as your journey to plastic enlightenment continues into the sunset.
You've been listening to Just Baking Conversation with James Skiffins
and Malcolm Childs. Follow us on Facebook, where we post photos, updates and other nonsense.
Let us know what you are just making and what your thoughts are on the conversation on this episode.
We have to thank our supporters, who we dearly appreciate.
Please support us in any way you can by sharing to Facebook or supporting us on our patreon.com.
Join us next time when we will be just making conversation about your local model shop.
So it's a goodbye from me.
That's a goodbye from me.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Is that it?
I think so.
Very good. I enjoyed that.
Yes.
Yeah, crikey, Moses. I didn't want to ruin it, but when you said that, I was like, oh no, don't say anything.
What?
I wasn't expecting to go so deep this evening.